Okay, thank you, everyone. Right, so I guess I will move and then I'll talk to the amendment. The person who moved the amendment will talk to the amendment.
Sorry, just,
But I just want to, I'll just move the original. Well, we've already moved it, but I'll just speak to it slightly just to start it off. But want to make clear that in both the amendments and the original, we've tweaked the wording to be everything back the same as what it was in the paper, but just with the stations called out instead of the 5 city rail link stations. But the, is it? It's different to.
Yeah, it's the new.
Okay, right. So it's just making clear those stations, not the government's language, which has been the 5 city rail link stations. On which part? We're not to the amendment yet. Is that what you're talking about?
Chair, my question was going to be noting what Roman numeral 5 specifically states. What is the purpose of Roman numeral 6? Because it seems to me this matter is already addressed at Roman numeral 5. If it's about feeling like you've got an extra layer of comfort, fine, but I would have thought that 6 is addressed through what 5 states.
Okay, that's probably more of a debating point, so I think. Moving the items, the wording is not quite correct because it needs to say the required by the National Policy Statement of Urban Development. It's talking about the mandatory intensification in walkable catchments, including those stations. That's the issue.
So I think, Chair, the wording needs to be retain mandatory intensification provided for in the walkable catchments as required by the National Policy Statement on Urban Development and for the stations at Maungawhau, etc., listed in the Resource Management Act, because there's 2 reasons for those walkable catchments. Is that correct?
Apologies, sorry, this changed during the break. The only 5 words that should be deleted there are and the 5 city rail link, and then you leave the bottom part required by the, because it needs to be.
We can make that absolutely accurate, like you're saying, Councillor Ferry. I just don't want anyone to think we're doing anything weird and that hasn't been discussed. There are 2 elements here. There is the Policy 3 under the NPSUD, and there's the RMA, which lists the stations. So we can make the change. It will look different, but as long as everyone understands it's nothing weird, we're just being accurate. So if you'd like us to do that, we can do that. It's just stating fact. There's nothing else going on.
So
but we would need to add some more words in there.
I just think
a further question that I have, now that it's quite clear what you are putting up, is under 3, the retention of intensification, maximising the investment in the city rail link, will that now presuppose the other stations of the actual stations of the city rail link will have further investigation?
This was in the paper. The only change was 6, VI, and then we decided to change what you said, just listing those stations. But
well, I was just trying to be factually correct, and again, in terms of factual correction, the city rail link is...
Yeah, that's why we've removed it.
Yeah, so...
But retaining intensification and maximises investment in city rail link is the whole rail corridor.
Yeah, no, I'm not disagreeing. I like the idea of it, but I'm just trying to understand the assumption that sits behind it with regards that the other 2 stations that are part of the city rail link.
Do you mean within the city centre cordon?
Yes.
That's already part of the city centre.
It is, but I'm just wondering what weighting then that presupposes.
Well, it's not part of Plan Change 120.
We're
But
not
I do want to be clear to the staff, just because I thought the only change was going to be, so it should say, retain mandatory intensification in walkable catchments, and instead of the 5 city rail link stations, it's just replacing those words, Maungawhau, Kingsland, Morningside, Mount Albert, and Baldwin Avenue, and then it goes, and as required by the National Policy Statement on Urban Development. So the only words that should have changed are just the names of the stations. Yeah. So I just said to make
We'll
Some
just
wording to
we'll
Sandra.
clarify that.
yeah.
I've just sent some words through to Sandra that I think catch it. Okay.
Yeah. The original, apart from just removing like the 5 city rail link because that was government language, just needs to be swapped out for. Yeah, all of that is correct. Yeah, thank you. So, as said in the official paper, retain intensification that maximises investment in city rail link. That was one of the principles before. Decrease housing capacity using a distance of more than 10 kilometres from the city centre as a starting point. That means that if there are THAB corridors removed, they would start on those outer areas that we've spoke about in the workshop. Decrease housing capacity through reassessing the intensification along corridors, starting with lower ranked bus corridors the same. 6, or VI, was conversations through the workshop and afterwards with the Deputy Mayor who, to make concerns clear that outside the THAB and the walkable catchments, there will be mixed housing urban zone land areas through most suburbs, including those within the 10, that are removed. The focus will be removing the areas down to MHS, say, where there's not good access to public transport or the city centre. It doesn't preclude options coming that are wider than that, but the staff have to come to us with options that start those directions. Right. For me, I'm speaking to the resolutions, and then we'll go to the amendments.
I just a clarification on the yellow that we're seeing now.
Yeah.
That is going to be an addition.
No,
So that's what I wanted to.
they are part of
find
the
out.
original substantive. I just noted that the yellow VI was an additional chairs rec, but that is a substantive motion. The only amendments so far are the ones that have been emailed to us. Yeah, so a chair can add as a substantive. Yeah, yeah. So the 6, although new today, is actually part of the substantive motion. I'm not amending my own proposal. And then the change of the stations was to clarify around Councillor Fletcher's points. Where we are today is we asked for flexibility. Even in our September resolutions, we're very clear that we would like a focus on outcomes for the city, not necessarily capacity. In our conversations on the regional deal or conversations with government, right up until Christmas, there was no discussion there would be any change to the current process, even after submissions were closed. The target came from keeping the capacity the same as Plan Change 78. We could move it around, but we had to keep the capacity the same. There was no 2 million figure written anywhere. It just happened to be the same capacity moving forward into the new plan. We obviously reduced the intensity or capacity around our flood areas, hazard zones, something that we lobbied or asked the previous government to, for the ability to do. We then also removed, if you look around, and I've worked with councillors on the 3 maps, Unitary Plan, Plan Change 78, Plan Change 120, showing councillors how much actually did get reduced from 78 to 120 in a lot of suburbs across Auckland. The actual spread of MDRS, that 3-storey zoning, was significant, right down to Pukekohe, right up to Warkworth, in every single part, right out to Gulf Harbour. All of that was 3 stories zoning. That has come back quite a bit through Plan Change 120. But clearly, the government had heard from not reading the submissions. There has been a lot of discussion around we've digested the feedback from Aucklanders. No one has seen the feedback from Aucklanders. They have clearly heard concerns, and they've now said we may change the law to allow you to drop this capacity. This is our one chance to do that. We have to send a letter. Obviously, you've heard the Mayor's concerns about sending proposals to government before they even change the law, but let's just say we assume that our principles and directions give confidence to the government that they will change the law. Then we will use this direction, but it won't preclude other decisions, to create options for us to consider through workshops, through a time frame we may or may not find out through legislation, but hopefully we do, And then we can change the positions through our plan, and we assume there will be some form of consultation with those affected. Obviously, for those people who there is no change, we assume they will have submissions supporting or opposing those areas. For people who see downzoning from Plan Change 120 to the new, whatever it looks like, they will be happy. There'll be people who might support that intensification and now it's disappeared. Those are probably going to be the most likely people who are upset and would like to submit again is, why have you removed the capacity or the height or the intensity from my area or from my street, I guess. So we will be saying to government that we do want Aucklanders to have a say, but we know that we do not want to waste, as the Mayor and others have said, the 13 million, but the 3 million on this process that had spent by Christmas. I'm assuming by now we've probably spent 4 or 5, considering there's been 55 people working on the submissions. There's been a lot of water to go under the bridge since then. So we want to protect the integrity of those submissions. People have spent a lot of money, a lot of time on those submissions as well. But any change that comes through that it's probably the right time right now, before the independent hearings panel has started up, that we do this work. I think this gives direction on the Auckland plan, it gives direction on the unitary plan, it builds on that, but we will need to sit within whatever, 1.6, whatever, to make sure there is scope for the hearings panel to move and remove streets based on the, or sections or whatever it is, through those panel discussions. Otherwise, we're just setting up the panel for another issue where they're going to have to randomly find capacity in different areas. To the amendments, I'll speak to them once the mover has moved them, but I will just say it is hard for both us and the staff to kind of understand what these amendments mean when they come very last minute to our emails. Obviously, people are in their rights to send them, but they're the first I saw them was, 15 minutes ago. So it is difficult to know their effects. And I will say, Councillor Ferry and I are happy to incorporate the noting because it doesn't, it's just a statement of fact. We're happy to note the Policy Planning Development Committee has yet to receive or review submissions received on PEC 120 and has no oversight of any themes or requests from Aucklanders. The rest the mover can speak to. For those of you who don't know this process, we will let the mover speak to the item. Then we do get questions under my discretion to staff or the mover on what it means, the impact of that, so all of us can do that then. This obviously extends the discussion, but that's okay. So I will now assume the next speaker is it Councillor Fletcher or Councillor Gillen?
Sorry, just before you put this, Chair, I've got a point of order. Would it be appropriate to raise it now?
Is it about
It's about the amendment, exactly.
Pardon? Sorry?
It's about the amendment, yeah.
Okay, we'll let the mover, I don't know if it's Councillor Fletcher or Gillen, or Councillor Gillen, we'll let him speak to his amendment and then you can ask the questions. Is that...
It's just that the content may be different because I'm challenging one of these as inappropriate to actually raise in this debate. Should I just...
so, yeah, I guess is that a point of order on the amendment? Yes, you can.
Just want to help. I don't want them to sort of make half of their speech while me saying don't say it. Yeah. So just drawing your attention, Chair, to 3.15.8, which is amendment must be directly relevant. Note the words directly is very important there. And I raise this in relation to point F in this amendment around parking minimums. So the standing orders are quite clear. Tangential relevance is not enough. It has to be directly relevant to be debated today. We've received no advice on parking minimums in this process. There's been no content in the presentation. There have been no questions asked about it today either. So parking minimums are not relevant and we should not allow this to go through as a debating point. It should be deleted with respect to colleagues. Thank you, Chair.
Can I see the... So... Yeah. When was... Oh, relevancy.
So what
we're
I'm
just getting
asking is
some
for that
advice
to be
on-
ruled out of order.
Hang on a second, we're just getting some advice.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
I mean, it isn't relevant. We don't have advice on it. And also the government has already announced a review on car parking minimum. So I would just ask the mover before he moves his amendment if he'll remove that one based on the fact it, understanding order 3.15.8 is not relevant and we have not received advice. I mean, the government's already announced a review on parking minimums. So
Mr. Chair, could I ask a question?
no.
The correct answer is not yet.
Thank you.
Ken. Hold that question.
Well, I guess if I move it and it's accepted by the seconder, that's then up to you to rule as to whether this point of standing, put the point of order is correct or not. Well, I haven't moved it yet, so you can't rule that yet.
Through the chair, just in terms of scope, parking minimum is outside of scope of PC 120, whether it's the current one we're in or this new version as well. So if that's helpful, it's not something we can look at anyway as part of the process.
Yeah, so are you happy to remove it from the amendment as it isn't relevant?
I'll decide when I get to that bit.
Okay, well, based on advice, I will rule it that it's not related to this. The government have also already announced we're advocating to the government to review something they already announced they're reviewing 2 weeks ago.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, colleagues.
That's okay. Right. So speaking to the motion, Councillor Gill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The meddling from successive governments in Auckland's ability to plan properly over the last few years have been very stressful for our communities, created real issues, and most importantly, have been completely unnecessary, because we all know the original unitary plan included more than enough capacity for our city. The requirement from the last government to allow 3 dwellings per parcel was bonkers, and the resulting Plan Change 78 made a mockery of proper town planning as developments were pepper-potted around our communities, putting huge strain on our infrastructure and havoc on our suburban roads that were not designed for this level of intensification. While it is good that the current government has allowed Auckland Council to withdraw Plan Change 78, foisting upon Auckland the requirement to maintain the same capacity of over 2 million dwellings was both ludicrous and arbitrary. The resulting Plan Change 120 as draft effectively upzones most single-house zoning and mixed suburban housing to mixed urban housing, a transformation of our suburban areas to urban areas, which is a radical departure from the original unitary plan, and no wonder that the number of submissions is so high. Thankfully, after huge pressure from across Auckland and having a hard think over the summer barbecues and Chardonnays, the government has backed down, but only a little, to another arbitrary figure of 1.6 million. This would still provide way more capacity than needed and mean that council, water care, Auckland Transport, Healthy Waters, community facilities, local boards and other parts of council will still need to plan for an unrealistic number of dwellings and population, creating extra unnecessary costs for Aucklanders. Now, while 1.6 million is a little more manageable than 2 million, I remain concerned at the real-world implications. We've heard today that we can accommodate the 1.6 million in the city centre, metro centres, around CRL, along transport corridors, etc., and keep the suburban areas across Auckland as they are in the current unitary plan, but not as the motion is currently written, particularly in regards to the point about 10-kilometre radius from the CBD. That would increase zoning on all properties within that radius to the level proposed in Plan Change 120. Including, for example, the whole of the North Shore ward that Councillor Hills and I represent, and even out west, including all of Te Atatū Peninsula, would increase from what is the current unitary plan to what is proposed in Plan Change 120. So to ensure the outcome the public and actually the government are expecting, I am putting forward several amendments to the Chair's motion, which I'll go through now, and I'm happy for them to be taken in parts. And if this is passed today, we can cross our fingers that we can finally put the last few years of planning blindsides behind us. So the first one, which the Chair did mention that he's happy to accept into the original motion, is just noting that this committee is yet to receive or review any of the submissions made on Plan Change 120, and that we have had no oversight of any of the themes or requests from the Aucklanders. All we know is that the number of submissions received is higher than the original unitary plan. The next one that I wanted to put in here is to remove the line that says that we'll decrease housing capacity using a distance of more than 10 kilometres from the city centre as a starting point, meaning that anything within that 10-kilometre radius, and we heard it was a circle, it might have fuzzy edges, etc., anything within that stays as it is in Plan Change 120. The next one is under point 8. So it'll be, should be C8 now, about the buffer, to provide a minimal buffer from the minimum 1.6 million dwellings, because otherwise we just leave it as buffer. It could be hundreds of thousands as a buffer. We need control over that. It should be minimal. And then the next one is to include several points that are regarding the time frame. So request that officers seek formal written confirmation from the Minister that 1, the Plan Change 120 planning process will be exempt from changes arising from the incoming Resource Management Act reform legislation likely to be enacted in June 2026, because we don't want to have to go through all this again once we've got this set in stone. 2, confirmation the Minister will extend the time frame to respond to his letter from the 17th of March until Council have received the summary of decisions requested in submission on Plan Change 120 and have time to consider them appropriately. That's because we have not yet considered what the public have said on this. 3, request the Minister extend the time frame for processing Plan Change 120 to allow for public consultation on these changes in accordance with Section 82 of the Local Government Act 2002. And the last point is the one the Chair may rule is out of order, which is to agree to advocate to the Government for a review of the National Policy Statement of Urban Development in order to allow councils to reinstate minimum parking provisions. And I actually see this as being very much linked and intertwined with what we're discussing today, because we have seen since the previous government removed the ability for council to insist on minimum car parks on site, we have seen many of our suburban roads filling up with cars. We have Auckland Transport having to respond to that, yellow lines here, etc. It is causing all sorts of problems. Weekly, I'm receiving complaints from various parts of the North Shore of where people are having to do dangerous manoeuvres to get around parked cars because roads are narrowed down to one lane, if that. And the reason for that is because the developments are going in without car parks on site. So, Mr. Chair, that is my amendment, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher.
I'll reserve my right to speak later in the debate.
Okay. Mayor Brown. Are you speaking to the amendment? Oh, sorry. Okay. Councillor Newman.
Oh, yeah, well, mine was more of a procedural, Chair, because I'm personally prepared to support most of the amendment, but I don't want to support the exclusion of 4. This Roman numeral 4 around the 10-kilometre radius. So if this is, I think that the move is already prepared to put it in parts, and I'm assuming with the division, but I just need to clarify how the voting will take place so that I can support the amendments with the exception of that one.
All right. So you don't, yeah.
The
This is a very difficult amendment. I'm taking it, I'm not sure how I can take so many things as a...
The strike through at Roman numeral 4 is part of the amendment, isn't it?
That is, so there's things being removed, there's things being added,
So
being...
what I'm saying is that, look, I'm prepared to support the amendment, but without that particular strike through. So is there a way in which this can be recorded? Otherwise, can I just ask that the mover, if he agrees to put it in parts, so if we can take a vote in part on Roman numeral 4? He did say that. Yep. Okay, thank you.
I think it's going to be easier to vote up or down with your vote recorded against or for.
Chair, there's some very compelling arguments, I think, for a number of points in the amendment, but it is one amendment which the mover has agreed to put in parts, and there is one part that I completely disagree with. The balance I support, so I'm not quite sure how that's going to be handled, but he is indicated he's prepared to put it in part.
Chair, in speaking to that, it certainly would be my preference that people be allowed to vote on or for or against those matters on this. And if I may, just as a point of clarification, it is entirely frustrating to me that you were not able to get this last night. As a councillor, and I know I speak on behalf of Councillor Gillen as well, we are not staffed with the resources, and the initial advice that I got was this would count as a substitution and therefore we couldn't do it within the standing orders. We received fresh advice today. So while it might be frustrating for you, it's also been very frustrating for those of us who are trying to exercise our democratic rights as best we can and to be as courteous as we can in being able to bring these matters forward.
I have no awareness of anything happening last night. We did receive an email from Councillor Newman at about 10 p.m, but I had no one's told me about amendments last night, so I could have helped or could have...
I wasn't putting amendments at 10 o'clock.
No, I know. But I'm not sure what you're referring to, Councillor Fletcher, because no one asked me about amendments. I could have definitely helped.
Planning law is particularly complex, and we wanted to ensure that if amendments were going to be put up, that they would not be ruled out for all the work you put into them on a technicality. It's only just today that I have received formal confirmation that the amendments in the form that we have presented them can be an amendment and not a substitution as such. So I hope in terms of
So is
good
this your...
democratic good faith...
Councillor Fletcher, is this your speaking turn?
No, it's actually
No.
mine because I've got a minute 11 to go.
Yeah, so just being absolutely clear, what you brought up to me now, I have no idea what you're speaking about. So I would have helped or known or this, whatever I could, but just being clear, I don't know what you're referring to. Councillor Newman.
Thank you for the remaining 55 seconds. So can I suggest that Roman numeral 4 there, I actually think it needs to be in red, and I'm assuming that if the mover is prepared to have this in part, that we can have, I would like to request somehow that you allow for the voting on 4 to be taken separately as a separate part.
Okay, we will go through this debate and then figure out how, because there is slight additions, there is removals, there is other additions, so we will, it's very unusual, but we'll go back to the Mayor. You would like to speak to the overall amendment, which is quite a long list of things.
Thanks for that. It is a bit confusing because there's yellow bits in and black bits out, but with regard to the black bits out, first of all, the dropping of the 10 kilometres from the centre, that's aimed at putting intensification out at Pukekohe and Wilsford rather than places close to the city, and so and close to all the infrastructure we've paid for. So I don't want the city to become an end of sprawl just to appease a bunch of NIMBYs and Parnell and politicians wanting to get re-elected. I've got no intention of trying to influence my street, and we shouldn't either. You've got to think regionally. I think giving that 10 kilometres is not that big a city out of this anyhow, so that's just disgraceful. I can't vote for removing IV. And as for the bits on the red on the next page, which are just extensions of time, we've already spent a hell of a lot of time and money going through 10,000 submissions we already have. Homeowners as well as developers and myself want clarity and to be able to move on from 5 years of this without further delay and dithering. I spoke to the developers forum yesterday, and they're fed up with not knowing what the rules are, and they don't want to waste any more time. We've just got to make some decisions, please. I mean, we've got to get this now. Probably we'll have a different government later in the year, so let's do it now. Well, at least we know that who is making decisions. So put me down as against crossing it, against removing the 10 kilometres and against delaying any more than we've already got. I mean, God almighty, it'd be great to do something this 3-year period.
Thank you. After the Mayor, we've got Councillor Ferry, Deputy Chair.
Kia ora. So this amendment, from my reading of it, and again, seen at the same time as most of the rest of us, is that it has 8 separate amendments within it. So the amendment to B, which is noting that we haven't seen the submissions, the chair and I have already agreed to incorporate that, so that's dealt with. There's an amendment to C2, which is the second principle, which rather than saying retain mandatory intensification in the walkable catchments now says retain mandatory intensification provided for in the walkable catchments. I'm unclear why that's necessary. There's the removal, as Councillor Newman has pointed out, of Principle 4, decrease housing capacity, the 10 kilometre issue. I'm pretty disappointed to see this chucked in at this point when what we're trying to do here is adopt some principles that will then guide us in the workshops that we have next. And we're setting ourselves some parameters. As staff have already explained, it doesn't rule out decreasing capacity within the 10. It just says it's a starting point. And so I'm concerned that if we do cross that one out, as the amendment suggests, actually we're saying it's all up for grabs right across the city, and we're not setting ourselves some frameworks for how we prioritise that discussion. It doesn't mean, as per the conversation particularly around the 7th principle that Desley put up, it doesn't mean we won't have those conversations about within the 10, but it says the priority is to look outside the 10. It doesn't say we won't, just says the priority. And I think that's actually really helpful for the workshops that we're going to have and the information that staff are going to have to bring us, which will be extensive. The next bit on my tour through the 8 bits, the minimal buffer. Again, this is something we will address through the workshop discussions. What is the appropriate size of a buffer? At this point, we have no advice. Some people might think minimal is 100,000. Some people might think minimal is 50,000. We need to talk that through. And so using the word minimal at the moment is going to give people, I think, some unrealistic expectations about what a buffer could be when we haven't had advice and we haven't workshopped it. E has a further 3 parts to it that I take as 3 out of my 8. The first one, exemption, we've just had some advice from staff, and we did talk about this at the workshop last week as well, that that's not a great idea because there will be parts of the reform that we will want to take advantage of, and this rules that out. If we have a full exemption, we actually want to seek some nuance there. E2 asks for an extension to the time frame to respond to the letter that in D, which is included in this amendment, D says that the Mayor will respond by the 17th of March, and then the amendments that's being sought, with no attempt to remove D, is that the Mayor won't reply by the 17th of March, so that doesn't make sense. And also, what we're doing today is making those principal decisions so that we can meet the time frame. And then the third one, we have repeatedly asked for extensions to the time frame. The Minister has repeatedly responded that he's not going to do it. And I guess I worry that by continually asking, continually getting a no, we're actually just frankly pissing him off. And I don't think that's helpful to resolving this situation. And you don't often hear me say that about a conversation with a National Party Minister. F has already been rolled out of order, so we're now down to 7. So I will not be supporting this amendment. I think it further restricts the workshop discussions we have to have. And I think a lot of the process stuff that it's pointing out is actually unhelpful for us seeking some resolution on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Were there any other speakers to this? Councillor Henderson.
Just quickly, Chair. I want to talk about the substantive around lowering the target a bit later, so just raising that. I'm not going to be talking about that now. We'll do that when you put that. So I'll focus my comments on the attempted removal of point 4. And let's be real here. This move is essentially a poorly dressed up attempt to further intensification from the best land in the city. It's taking it away, and West Aucklanders and South Aucklanders have seen this. They know this too well. We've seen this movie before for decades and for generations in this city. This amendment wants to remove a principle of decreasing housing capacity using a distance of 10 kilometres from the city centre as a starting point. Starting point's a very important point there. And the effect is quite simple. The intention is to downzone wealthy suburbs, totally undermining the compact city approach that we've supported in the future development strategy, a bunch of other documents since and before as well. The starting point there is long-standing council policy. And if we don't do it, Councillor Ferry's right. This is all up for grabs. The city's all up for grabs. Supporters of this removal will have to justify why they think it's fair that West Auckland and South Auckland continues to take all the density of the city when we are not blessed with the amenities, when we are not blessed with the access to work and study that central areas have. We are not blessed with the bus routes. We're not blessed with the water infrastructure. We have sewage overflows in Te Atatu all the time when there's heavy rains, and they took all the housing. That's what they have to explain to this body to get your support. They have to explain why they think it's okay for Te Atatu and for Massey to have more high-density zoning in the unitary plan than Ponsonby, Greylin, Parnell, and more centrally located suburbs. Parnell came up in the debate last night, I add. Let's talk about Parnell. Parnell has a train station. Parnell has the CRL coming online. Parnell has the Central Interceptor. All the investment of the world, and walkable, because I've done it several times, to the city centre. There is no sensible reason why we should be deleting 4 as a matter of city planning at all. There is no sensible reason for excluding centralismist communities from playing their part again, like we have always done in this city. Places like Te Atatu Peninsula are outside of the 10-kilometre radius, and rightly so. They have taken all the intensification. They continue to get none of the investment. The Mayor is exactly right. We have to think regionally here, and I would encourage colleagues to vote down this amendment and think regionally. Thank you, Chair.
Kia ora, Councillor. Thank you. Member Karen Wilson.
I originally didn't have any intention of speaking to this. I do take heart from Councillor Shane there in the sense that he always mentions our west in terms of Henderson, and so South Auckland also deserves. You know, I'd have to say that there's no other means to garner political interaction other than through council, but with iwi. So we understand the political nuances better than most and rely to a certain extent on Auckland Council to help us navigate our way through. None of this, in terms of the amendment, at all promotes what we would wish and to be expected for Māori, iwi Māori, mātāwaka and mana whenua. Nothing there reflects that at all. I didn't expect that we would have the ability to say what we would wish. Instead, I have trust and confidence in Auckland Council, especially the staff that are tasked to do this role. We want to take this city, Tāmaki Makaurau, forward. But what we're ending up with is there's almost seems to me personal choice around what they'd prefer. I didn't think that was the role of councillors here. I do promote in the sense of haukura, but it makes no sense to me looking at that, A, that it was brought here, as has been already stated, late, and then have an expectation that we will somehow get it and we'll vote accordingly. No amount of kōrero at this late stage is going to make me be convinced that the amendment in any way addresses what we already do understand by the original amendment. Have trust and confidence, for goodness sake, on the staff that are here to do the job, and the chair and our mayor. That's my view of the world. And you hardly like to ever hear me say that, but I do understand the nature of what's been brought before us and our ability to work together to make sure that we can negotiate our way through without making certain steps that will jeopardise that, especially for our mayor and those that are doing the work outside. I would absolutely not support this amendment.
Kia ora. Thank you, Member Wilson. Councillor Short.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am concerned with this amendment and not having the ability to question officers on the financial and the legal implications of some of the things that have been tabled. I do actually agree with Haukura member Karen that having something come in so late in the piece that it does make it really hard for some of us to really kind of get our heads around what this may look like for Auckland, etc., etc. If I go back to what PC 120 means for my ward, it means we're getting less areas of intensification, or less widespread intensification compared to earlier blanket rules. And it's also opportunities for targeted intensification around our transport centres, and obviously stronger protections against hazard-prone areas and blah, blah, blah. The other thing, I do agree, I like that B is in there and B is set, but one of the things that I can't agree with is also CI being removed, was it 4, the 10-kilometre radius, and obviously E onwards, and V, what's it? Sorry, I'm making a mess of this now. C, V, I don't know my Roman numerals. Again, if this was sent in with a bit more time for us to actually process it and understand the implications of it, maybe, but having it tabled 15 minutes to us, or 15 minutes to us going through the presentation, I think is a bit rough. So again, thank you for your time, John, in putting this together with Fletcher, but at the same time, I can't support it, so thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor, thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Chair. Look, I support the amendment for B. I'm concerned about C4, so I support that. But I want to ask just a question to you and the Mayor on E, because although I sort of agree with it, but I'm pretty sure that the government don't want this to happen as per their letter, and I don't want to sort of turn around and agree to a recommendation that we already know that the government has not agreed with. All right, so just on E, can I just ask some questions? Because you and the Mayor are the ones that have been talking to the Minister, right? He wants this done by the 17th of March, is that correct? I've got the letter
As I
here.
understand it, is the government have got this window of opportunity. They're trying to help us, especially they've heard from us that we want this flexibility. This is an opportunity. I think that if we just keep pushing the barrow, the Minister has said at his speech, it has taken almost 6 years to get here. So I don't know I can't speak for the Minister, but we're trying to, what I thought was do the right thing by the majority around this table.
So just supplementary, the E3, which is extending the time frame to allow for public consultation, there will be public consultation, won't there?
All advice we've had is that there will be some form of public consultation, especially for the people who a change has affected them. And they believe, and the advice we've had and the conversations after the speech was that it can be done if we move now within the time frame. It will be, as I think legal mentioned to us at the workshop, if there is a need or the panel says we cannot do this in the time frame, that will come back to us or the Minister for that advice. But right now we don't have advice of what that is. That correct, Megan?
Yes, we don't have any detail.
And on E2, which is confirmation, because to extend the time frame, noting that we haven't read all the submissions, can you confirm in your discussions with the Minister that he's very much aware that we won't have read the submissions? Is that correct?
That's correct. And yeah, that's your speaking turn complete? Yeah. Councillor Watson.
Yeah, thanks. Last time I asked a question, I started with the last sentence of the Minister. I'll start with the first one of his letter this time. Thank you for all the work that Auckland Council has undertaken at pace. Well, he's certainly right about that, at pace. I think the Minister could well have taken note of that old saying, more haste, less speed, because when you do something quickly or in a rush fashion, then you often make mistakes. And that's what's happened here, as opposed to careful planning, which leads to better outcoming. And I think that is all all these amendments are asking for is for time and for the ability to try and get some better outcome at the end of all this than what has occurred thus far. And that's certainly the case with the first one. And I'll confine myself to the big bulk at E in the amendment. I think, before I do that, that C4 doesn't automatically preclude looking at, areas that are inside the 10Ks, and I agree with that. I agree with what Councillor Gillen said there. The first one there, to look at an assurance that we are exempt from changes arising from the Incoming Resource Management Act. Well, doesn't that make sense? If they're going to change everything after we've gone through this, shouldn't we put that question to them right at this point? So that's a statement in the patently obvious, especially given the less than organised and impressive way that this matter has been conducted to date. Similarly with 2, confirm that the Minister will extend the time frame to respond to his letter until Council have received the summary of decisions. Well, as I said a little bit earlier on, if we had taken advice of good practice, we would have had a sense of what our public thought anyway. Not having done that, this is the next best thing. And similarly, 3, request the Minister extend the time frame for processing PC 120 to allow for public consultation in accordance with the Local Government Act, because it's very clear to me, although there was a very good response, there were a lot of people who found the whole process a bit overbearing and very difficult to engage in, as is often the case with consultations of this kind. So if there's an opportunity to get more people in, that'd be great. The thing that really disturbs me about all of this, though, and the amendments sort of there's a kind of implicit criticism, is the whole notion that somehow this is going to result in better outcomes, like this notion of just flood Auckland with upzoning, as if zoning in itself helps affordability, because we have been through 10 years of the unitary plan, and the prices of houses and units virtually doubled in most instances under that. We went through the special housing areas, and all that did was inflate the price of the land. So speculators benefited from that. And what really disturbs me, and the notion that there's just certain parts of Auckland taking development or intensification, that's nonsense. The most populous ward is Albany Ward, actually. And to be honest, if you drive anywhere in Auckland, you will see widespread intensive development. And in my ward, Whanua Pai, Hibiscus Coast, Long Bay, Albany itself, it's everywhere. That's why we've got the biggest population, is our ward. But equally, it applies to any other part of Auckland as well. You know, just get out in the car and drive around and have a look. But what really disturbs me is the notion that this is all being progressed in the sense of helping affordability, when we actually know from social scientists who specialise in housing that this is not what has happened, and that it's not addressing the fundamental problem. The fundamental problem is that, for as far as low-cost housing goes, not low quality, but low-cost housing, all the finance was sucked out of it back in the late 80s and 1990s. Back in the early 60s, around 32% of new homes were in the lower quartile, and that was because of things that families could capitalise on, family benefits. They could get low-interest loans, half the market rate, 3%, and repayments were set with your ability to pay, normally about 30%. That's why in that period, council and community groups also benefited, because they could borrow at 3%. That's why you got a lot of pensioner flats. And there was a general political consensus at that time. That all changed with the fourth Labour government. And this is important because it tells and explains why we are where we are today, and while the notion of just rezoning land is somehow a panacea. It's not. It hasn't worked before, and it's not going to work again. So under Douglas and his merry crowd, they basically sucked out all the finance, which at that time amounted in 2017 dollar values to about $3 billion at times, $2.5 billion. That went into capital assistance to help low cost but well-made houses. And you can see them on the North Shore, South Auckland, West Auckland drive around, they were the beneficiaries of that era. Now, there is nothing allied to this rezoning, this zoning as if that in itself is an action. It's an action that hasn't worked for the last 10 years of the unitary plan, and it's a hope, it's an aspiration, as the language they use even here, for the future. So what really disturbs me is the notion and the misleading of people that somehow by rezoning, suddenly all the big chunks of Ponsonby and Herne Bay is going to be opened up to the poor and dispossessed of Auckland. No, it's not. You're not going to get any closer to it than you are now. That's not going to happen. That's a con, and that's misleading. If you want to do something, restore the capital assistance that the fourth Labour government under Douglas took away and has not been replaced. So it is zero. It is virtually zero. And the people in modest incomes who benefited from that have been cut out. That's why the home ownership rate in Auckland has plummeted from 70-odd% to the 40s to 48, just at the same time as those in rentals has reached a record. So our city is the lowest for home ownership and the highest for rental people. And that's a consequence of 30 years of that kind of almost neoliberal view of housing. And playing around with zoning and upzoning all of Auckland is not going to change that. So that's my fundamental objection to all of this, but at least those amendments go some way to trying to get our council to restore a little bit of control and input into this process that has been foisted upon us and has been conducted ineptly. It is a shambles, and I don't think the minister from Days Bay is going to be all that keen to open up the spotlight to his own performance with that. So politically, there's an opportunity to push our case here because they've made such a mess of it and it's election year. So let's stand up for our Aucklanders and do that through these amendments and through a far more assertive approach dealing with the minister.
Thank you, Councillor Watts. Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If this amendment doesn't go through, we go back to the substantive, correct? And I get a chance to speak again? Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I'll just speak just on one point with this. You know, the whole thing is just a debacle. It really is ad hoc rubbish. But this, I support the removal of the 10-kilometre city circle around the centre of the city. First of all, I've run two things here, Google Earth and our own GIS, and it shows Te Atatu Peninsula at the very minimum being 50% included inside that circle. You know, it misses out the one way in and one way out. And then we find it's a fuzzy circle, like it's not on the CBD or the Central Post Office, it's on the city centre. So I mapped that, and you've probably got, at the worst place, a kilometre variation. That's just an example of everything else we've been asked to do today, on top of the fact of 10,000 submissions that we aren't even looking at. And so, yeah, so I want to support, I'll support these changes here for the first vote. Thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Mike Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have to say, this was going to be, on the face of it, a rather stressful meeting, but I believe it's been so far, with a certain exception, very constructive and helpful. The questions have been, I thought, very helpful and quite penetrating. And I think they may have been difficult for the staff to respond to, but I think in thinking about them, they will help the council's position significantly. I think, Mr. Chair, you've run the meeting very well. And good on you for that. We're dealing with an unprecedented muddle here. There is a saying, decide in haste and regret at leisure. And I hate to say, but going back to the meetings of August and the meetings of September, I told you so. And other members around the table can rightfully share in taking that position. We have a difficult situation with a cocksure but inexperienced minister when it comes to RMA matters, and we have a pending election which puts pressure on all the political parties. So that's the situation we're dealing with. But the people who are under the most pressure are the 10,500 Aucklanders and their families who have taken the trouble at our request, at our deadline, which was more truncated than it needed to be to suit ourselves, but it hasn't worked out very well. They are the people I'm concerned about now, and 10,500 submissions, from my experience, which goes back some years, would signal that people are not happy. And I do think that the politicians in Wellington are well aware of that, if some of us here are not. I must comment, Mr. Chair, that when the amendment was tabled, which I will be supporting, and I thank the mover and seconder, that you were concerned about the lack of notice, and that's fair enough, and that's one aspect of it was ruled rather questionably, but that's your right, as irrelevant. However, I recall a meeting in July of this committee when a well-supported, publicly supported notice of motion to ban helipads was ambushed by an amendment by substitution, which actually does not exist, it didn't exist in our standing orders, with no notice at all. So that's the way it goes. Now, there was a reference made by the Mayor, whom one would think that in this time of crisis, because I believe it is, this is going to get quite complicated as we go on, I'm sure, talked about election candidate, Parnell Nimby's election candidate wanting to be re-elected. I take it he's not referring to the election candidate who wanted to be re-elected, who got 50,000 from the waterfront property developers Tramco, who got 25,000 from the CP group for his re-election campaign, 10,000 from Precinct Properties, another waterfront developer with ambitions to do more. There was another company that paid 19,000. One of its members gets paid $2,000 a month from the public purse, and so that donation is a very, very wise donation. They'll get the whole lot back again. And obviously they do that to get the policies they want, unfortunately. So that's politics. And so I would expect a bit more of a leaderly approach to this crisis, Mr. Mayor, not sniping at people in Parnell as numbies. And unfortunately, other parts of my ward came up to be singled out by Councillor Henderson, who, if you listen to him most of the time, you would think that intensification was the best thing since sliced bread.
Councillor,
and that people who don't want it, there's something wrong with them, they're reactionaries. No, now we know he doesn't like it at all. He reckons it's terrible, and he wants to impose it on other suburbs that happen to be special character areas. That's quite revealing, actually, and undercuts your whole approach in the past.
Yeah,
in terms of my ward,
Councillor Lee.
Waitemata ward
Councillor
is the
Lee.
most intensified in this region. Thank you.
Chair, what are you going to do about that? Because that's
Councillor Lee.
That's not good behaviour, is it?
Councillor Lee. Yeah, it is a debate, Councillor Watson. It is a debate, but I don't want, and I don't think it's acceptable to start ripping into people by voice. And yes, it happens around here, but it's unneeded, and we spoke about it last week. So I think it was a pretty good speech, Councillor Lee, but at the end, there was no need to rip into other councillors.
Well, they were ripping.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bartley. Oh, sorry, I just have to move an extension of time. Do I need to second it? Yes. Councillor Ferry? All those in favour of extension of time? Any opposed? A couple of people. Councillor Bartley, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. I won't be supporting the amendment. I support the 10K, and that was removed from the amendment, so I'm going to wait if we end up getting to the substantive. In terms of the minimum parking requirements, back in September last year, in this committee, or the equivalent, we passed to request advice in the new term of council on the impacts of the former government's removal of the ability of councils to include minimum car park requirements in their planning documents, with a focus on areas without access to good public transport. So I'm having faith in that process, because I do think that we should be looking at reinstating those minimum parking requirements where it doesn't make sense, because we are riddled in certain areas that have taken intensification with streets that you can't access, you just can't get through them. And perhaps that wasn't the intent for this kind of consequence, but that's what we're dealing with. It makes sense to have it where you've got the transport hubs. It doesn't make sense to have it in the suburbs where you're not close to a train station, and you've got 3, 4, 5 bedroom townhouses with just one car park. So what else do I want to say about this? I think the officers were clear that, that intensify where you've got the infrastructure, and it makes sense that it's in the city centre and around, and where we've got the investment in the city rail link and the train stations and metro centres and city centres. It's just, I'm just sitting here thinking, wow, this is all about principles, and it's not even decision making. And the government the cabinet doesn't even have to listen to us anyway. They can go ahead and do what they do, but we're all getting worked up over principles that will inform cabinet. It's just it's crazy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Williamson.
Yeah, look, I'm only 1 minute contribution, but I've sort of got a mathematical background, and I like the idea of someone's putting a proposal about a 10K zone, to be able to have a map and to look at what's in and what's out, and know that that's included, that's not, and I don't know where it's from, and I don't know how to put a circle onto Google Maps without having a printed map and putting a compass on it or whatever. So I'm now going to have to vote for something that I don't even know what it's about. And the second thing I hate in politics is ever drawing a line in the sand. Because the moment you ever draw a line in the sand, there is someone just on the other side who's got just as legitimate case as the person just on the other side. Could actually run down the middle of a house. So people in the front living room can have not intensification, but you have it on the back part of the house. So I just cannot see why we are doing this today. I don't even know how to vote on some of these bits and pieces. I like some of them, I don't like others. I want some, I don't want others. But they're a bloody hodgepodge. And I would have thought that the one thing we could easily do is come back again. I don't see much in the diary on Thursday for anybody. Why can't we have another planning and so on? A couple of days can't be that big a deal. And we could actually have this all printed out, laid out sequentially, what the amendments were. We could ask questions of officials, because I've still got some really big questions about what some of this means. And I'm now having to vote on bloody something I feel grossly inadequate to vote on.
Last speaker, and then I guess it's, do you want me to speak to the amendment? Yeah. Okay, so I'll just speak briefly to the amendment. Look, I have done my best not to speak out. It's very clear where my allegiance to the current government is, but I've done my goddamn best to not speak out, not criticise. This process, from beginning to end, is chaos. It has been chaos, but I've been trying my best to bring us all along, deal with the issues, write to letters with the mayor, meet with ministers, meet with staff, try and figure out the best way through during where the legislation sits at the time we have these conversations. For 2023, sat and saw my community absolutely smashed by the floods. So then the first thing I did was figure out, I think it was 6 days after the floods, we came back here and I put forward a motion to stop and halt Plan Change 78 and figure out what the heck we do next. It was the last government. They said, oh yeah, you can have a delay, but it wasn't clear that we could do anything about hazards. Then the next government comes in, then we put another request. Then the government changed and they removed the light rail corridor. I actually voted against not including the light rail corridor because I knew, I think it was one of the only, maybe Shane was the other one, leaving that blank because we would end up in problems. We did. MDRS, we complained about that. I heard the people around here, the majority who said we want MDRS gone. I went down to Wellington. I spoke to select committees. I'm doing my goddamn best with the current government, who I'm not a super fan of, to try and get the outcomes for our community and our city and move this forward. We then got Plan Change 120 and the ability to change it. We asked for if we could have the law in March, April, May, June. We got it in August and then got a date that was set for the day of the election. I didn't choose that. None of us chose that, but we had to work with what we had in the moment to get the best outcome for the city. A lot of that was removing significant, including in my own area, significant through MDRS right across on the North Shore too. There's lots of parts of all our communities where the zoning has moved quite considerably from the coastlines, from areas that just seemed ridiculous, right down to Pukekohe, right up to Warkworth, right out to Half Moon Bay was all peach. It's now white and yellow right now. So then we got this. We spoke through, the regional deal's not public yet, but the conversations we had there with ministers, with others, was can we have some available room, flexibility? It was no up until Christmas. I thought, okay, we've got this, we spoke to public meetings, we did our best, and then we get to Christmas and we think we're still locked in with the 2 million. I literally came back on the 12th of Jan thinking, we've got a proactive year of things we can do, and then lots of rumours and innuendo. I'm hearing from National Party people from different parts of the party, which councillors are talking to which ministers are talking to which people, swishing around. Now we're here, and then a new announcement comes, and we're dealing with that. Today is our chance to deal with what you all asked for last year, which was flexibility, reducing the capacity. Now we're sitting here again, hey guys, can we have another delay? We are sitting with, I've talked to older people in my ward who are literally like, I don't know when to sell my house and retire because I don't know if I fit into MDRS, don't know if I fit into single house, I don't know if I fit into MRS or whatever. And then we're going to say, can we just add another year? I know it's been 6 years already. Rotorua have got more intensive development in their city centre than we have because they did the MPSUD in 2024. There is issues here up the wazoo that we're trying to deal with, and we want more delay. This is politics. This is not, if Councillor Gillen, you're the councillor for the same ward as me. If you actually cared about this, you might have talked to me about it. There have been other people around here who've asked, can I discuss the unitary plan maps, the 78 maps, 120 maps, see how that's laid out? Yes, you sent emails, Councillor Fletcher, but you didn't say you were bringing a bunch of amendments. I could have helped. I really could have helped. I'm trying not to throw this government under the bus, not trying to throw us under the bus. We've got people who just don't know what's going on in their backyard. We've got investment leaving the city. So for me, I'm not voting for any of this because it just delays and confuses. What we put up there gives us options. MHU will be reduced in almost every single community. I can't say all, because then if we tell the government all and we come back and it's not all, then they'll say we lied. So we have to give belts and braces. There are bus routes outside that 10 kilometres which seem stupid. Councillor Williamson has pointed them out. Those need to be dealt with first. We need to work where there is no infrastructure. So I'm sorry if I'm sounding pissed off, but I literally don't know where. Every time we get some movement, yes, this whole thing is stupid, but we are stuck in a legal quagmire time and time and again. The last government, the new RMA changes. Look, if we leave ourselves out, Councillor Lee, of this, we shouldn't, voting for the bit around exempt from changes. Well, we've talked to the government, I said that. I spoke at Select Committee. We want to be exempt from doing everything, but if you want helicopters, if you want other changes, the combined plan is where we have to do it. So there will be significant things we want changed. But should we vote to leave ourselves completely out? Well, that will block the ability to bring helicopters together in the Hauraki Gulf to the city. It'll block issues that we want to do. I'm going off tangents no, what I'm saying is that, for my opinion, I'm trying to do, and we are trying to do our best. We will have these same debates, hopefully in the next few weeks, in workshops, and we can point out, that's ridiculous. Bring that in, bring that out. But we have to take something to government to allow them to change the law to allow us to do this. Is that stupid? Yes. We got told, the Mayor got told before that speech, before Cabinet, there was going to be a change to the capacity, and we thought, great. The surprise was this: we've got to take Cabinet, go to the headmaster and go, can we do it like this? I think that's stupid, but it's what we have to do. We don't hold the keys. So I'm hoping today we can move forward with a list of general directions. Yes, they want suburbs, some want maps. The coalition have different ideas of what they want in public. You've got leaders. Anyway, so I will be voting against these changes because I just need us to move forward. And then we can have these debates on paper and really get the maps back out to the public, and hopefully they can all have a say. But if we just throw our hands up again and say, we didn't really ask for that, we don't really care about this, then we'll just get stuck again. The government will change, we'll be stuck with 2 million, and then the new government, whoever they are, will probably change the RMA again, and we'll be dealing with it again. But right now, please, can we just move forward to a sensible place that we asked for 6 months ago? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. The suggestion that this is all about politics is, I could respond to that emotionally, but I'm not going to, because I don't think that that's going to be sensible. I just want to take us back to September last year. Both Morris and I have the advantage of having been in Parliament, and we don't have an upper house or anything, and you can be the fastest little lawmaker in the West, and of local government. And my political instincts told me last year that both Labour and National had blood on their hands, that the thing was a mess, and that it needed the public feedback. They weren't reading the room. And that's why I put forward an amendment last year to say, let's have a couple of months consultation before we go out with notification, because I think most of us, except for the extremists and the zealots amongst us, knew that what was being put to Auckland was a bit of an anathema. So I was voted down on that because we had to speed things up, and the Mayor was complaining that I was dithering, and I'm sure he's going to say the same thing again today. But I will say in return to him, he might be worried about the developers, but I'm worried about, more generally, Aucklanders who do want certainty. And so I think in many ways, many of us would say today that we owe it to Aucklanders to get certainty. What is driving me on this more than anything else, and I'll come to it in a moment, is the fact that we could invest so much more time in this, the resources of planning officers and our lawyers, and we could be sitting around, as much as we all loathe sitting up here for hours and hours on end, in more workshops, and the whole thing could be overturned in 3 months' time and we start all over again. So if nothing else, I want to know, before we waste any more money, and I thought that there was a big mantra in this council, there's no more waste. I want to know that what we are doing is, if we proceed, is actually going to count towards what the new plans that we can give Aucklanders with certainty. To be honest, I'm not too upset or not about the 10K issue. If it was so marvellous, then I'm surprised that we didn't come up with it before now. But that's fine, I'm not going to die in a ditch over that. I'm disappointed that having sat through the Civil Defence and Emergency Committee last week, and for those of you who were at the Civil Defence and Emergency Committee last week, you will have heard Fenn say, can we please, please, please do something about the parking situation that denies them. I didn't interrupt you, Councillor Ferry. Please, I would ask you not to interject. Well, for fuck's sake, get on with it. Might be okay for you to say, Mr. Mayor, but this is actually quite an important issue for Aucklanders. And they're wanting to know...
It is not helpful to have Councillor Fletcher interrupted, please. I didn't hear what was said, but if that's what was said, that's not appropriate. So continue, Councillor Fletcher.
I'm used to the Mayor speaking to me on a regular basis with that particular language. It's not language that I use a lot, as some of you who've known me a while might know that I don't use that language. And if it's designed to intimidate me, you've absolutely missed the mark. So I think that there is merit in, before we invest any more time and effort in getting some certainty from the government in writing, that before we go and do a whole lot more workshops, a whole lot more committees and a whole lot of everything, that work is going to count and the whole thing isn't going to be tipped upside down. I do regret that we didn't go up for consultation later last year, because the government would have read the tea leaves and they would have moved very much faster. What has happened is objectionable, but let's take the opportunity now that we've got to provide advocacy in terms of providing certainty for Aucklanders. And so I would ask you, and I hope as Chair, that you will allow people to vote on the different subclauses, because as I say, I'm pretty open-minded about the 10K and so forth. But in raising the matter of the CRL stations with you, it was to highlight the fact that we don't question often enough. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with asking questions. So my question to you is, do you want to invest a whole lot more, waste a whole lot more time on this, or can we just get the confirmation from the Minister that this work is going to be taken into account on how we move forward? Because I don't want to see us tied up with wasting more money. I don't want to see us tied up with judicial reviews. I want to see us be able to move on. I'm one of those that would like to downsize at some point from my home in Mount Eden. I would like to know what the certainty is going to be. It's hardly a surprise for anybody, wherever you might live in this region. We all need certainty. And I think while it's commendable that you are trying to develop some principles here around how we might proceed, the bottom line is I don't trust that the government isn't just going to shoot us in the foot by coming up with a whole new set of parameters and we start all over again. And I don't think it's doing anything for those of us who promoted amalgamation. I think we all were rather idealistic around the fact that it was going to mean that we could work cohesively as a team. But what we've got is just this constant polarisation within council, and I think it's unfortunate. I'd like to see us being able to work together, get those answers from the government and be able to move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So I think how we've been able to do it is the Bees Incorporated, the first one that Councillor Newman has asked for to be separated out, we will go first. So that would be removing 4.
Excuse me, Chair.
Sorry, Councillor.
Look, I know this. We're discussing the amendment. I put my nice resolve. I wish to speak. And I also know there's no closing remarks when we're discussing the amendment. So my name was on the list to speak, but I don't know what happened to it.
Sorry.
Okay, no, that's all right.
No.
I just wanted to sort of bring that to your attention, Chair.
Apologies, Councillor.
Bye-bye.
You were not showing until the team scrolled up. So you're actually written there twice.
Yeah.
So, Councillor, please.
I've lost that much weight that people tend not to see me around this table.
No, it was genuinely... it was hidden, so apologies. So please.
Kia ora here, man. I won't take long. Principles are what I base my decision on. And we've been given two principles from our kaimahi, our staff, for us to consider. Principles used to achieve PC 120 housing capacity, and also recommend principles amending PC 120. So principles for me is what I base my decision making on. What I also base my decision making on is not making a line in the sand. And this is what we're doing with these recommendations. We are making a line in the sand. I also, and that was part of the pātai that I asked our staff, and that is, when are we going to have these workshops? Because these workshops we're going to have in the future are going to guide those principles and guide the workshops that we will be having around PC 120. I wish to be involved in those discussions with the colleagues around this table. That's how we make decisions where we are. And when I say colleagues, that includes Haukura, if people were thinking it was just governing body. No, not at this committee. And I look forward to those discussions. As a result, short and sweet, I will not be supporting the amendment. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Councillor Filipaina, and so sorry about missing you off the list. Kia ora. Right, so I think that, so these are the amendments by addition. So well, actually the first one is removing. So that is the first thing we're voting on, just the removal of C4. So if that, is that going to be up on, oh, right. Yeah, can we, how will that be shown on the screen? Oh, there we go. So I think go to your resolve and you'll be able to press the buttons. Oh, sorry. All those in favour? No, sorry, I just assumed. So all those in favour of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No. Show of hands.
I think that, yeah. So C4, removing C4. It sounded like it was lost on voices. I think we just moved to division, sorry.
Thank you, members. You're voting on removing clause C4, which is on your screen. We will start the division and we will ask you to vote using resolve. Thank you.
And Councillor Fully, we have your email if it doesn't work for you.
Oops.
Greg, you all right with yours?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for checking on me.
That's right. I remember last time. Yeah.
No, it's nice. Thanks.
Yeah.
I must have remembered our.
Oh, I did it just sort of make sure. That's all right. I wouldn't have voted for you, just to let you know.
Well, you can come and do it for me.
I don't know how that's going to be done.
So thank you, members. That division on that clause is lost.
So that vote was lost 16 votes to 5. Thank you. Right, and so we'll move to the other amendments. So I think we can take the rest as one. Okay, all those in favour of the remainder of amendments? Right, sorry, we're doing a,
Division.
right, sorry, we're doing a, division. Okay, all those in favour of the remainder of amendments? Right, sorry, we're doing a, division. Okay, all those in favour of the remainder of amendments? Right, sorry, we're doing a, division. Okay, all those in favour of the remainder of amendments? Right, sorry, we're doing a, division. And once again, Councillor Foley, we have your votes via email. Thank you.
Thank you, members. If you can vote using resolve on the amendment for the remainder of the amendment. Thank you.
That's for all the rest, Richard. Is what he said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, no, sorry. These are for the amendments. Thanks. You wrote to me at the beginning of the term and talked about bullying behaviour.
Thank you, members. So the results of the division on the remainder of the amendment is lost. 14 votes to 7.
So that was 14 votes to 7. Kia ora. Okay, right. So shall we have... Oh, we go back to the substantive now. Right. So we'll go back to the substantive, which, of course, if there are speakers to the substantive, Councillor Patterson-Hamlin.
Kia ora. All right. Cool. Breathe. Good afternoon. Ooh. We're all doing great, team. I have more to say. Look, as we're all very well aware, over 10,000 Aucklanders have submitted on this process, which has now been interrupted in what I understand to be quite an unusual step by the Minister. As I understand, these resolutions will acknowledge that change of number, of the ideal aspirational number from the government, in such a way that doesn't unduly prolong this process or undermine what we've already received from those 10,000 or so submitters. So, in other words, we say, thank you for your input, Minister. We'll incorporate it along with the 10,000 other people. And even though you're not in Auckland, we're going to make an exception for you because we respect you. And you are the Minister for Housing. So, you know, even though there's not a lot of precedent for that. But importantly for me, these recommendations don't prolong the process, and because I really don't want us to lose sight of the actual things we're trying to address, the actual problems. So when we delay, we increase even further the really many people for whom home ownership becomes an impossibility, or who are paying 50, 60, 70, 80, 90% of their income in rent. I'm one of the very privileged few of my generation who can call themselves a homeowner, and if my mother hadn't died at the age of 66 with her retirement savings completely intact, that wouldn't have happened for me at all. So we also make Auckland, with further delays, we make Auckland a really unappealing place for investment or development, and we risk a scenario where we enable development, and maybe we'll get it perfect, maybe we'll do this exactly right, and we'll enable the exact right amount of development, the exact right number of places, but by that point everybody's gone and they've all bought something in Melbourne because they got sick of us swithering around. So that's what I have to say. Hopefully that's helpful. We're all doing well.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Turner.
Thank you very much. When I got elected in 2018 as a local board member, we were talking about planning changes, and we haven't stopped talking about planning changes to this day. To say that we're up against time frame and we've got to stop, you know, mucking around. We'll be talking about it next year, we'll be talking about it the year after. It goes on and on. We have an organisation that is besotted with process, and yet in this whole issue, we're not following process. It's not our fault entirely. In fact, I don't think it's our fault much at all. And I next time might vote for the McGillicuddy Serious Party and get more sense out of what's out of central government. But I'm not going to vote for something where we've had 10,000 submitters and we're voting in principle. We're voting to establish principles before we even heard from those submitters. And then we're going to open it up maybe again and let some more people submit. And you know, this has been a ad hoc, knee-jerk reaction from day one, and there's no need to rush. You know what they say: speed. The faster the speed, the more damage the crash.
The bigger the mess.
So I'm not. I won't be voting for this, supporting this. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, thanks. I will support it. I share some of the sentiment of previous colleagues. I hope that city planning decisions that have consequences decades into the future, that imprint upon a city and its socioeconomic environment and its culture and everything, would not be subject to the short-term political realities of a government trying to get re-elected. The climb down from the government, I can't understand it other than politics. That's it. It seems to me like pure political opportunism, and I'm sorry to say that, but I can't think of another reason. We haven't even seen the submissions, right? So we asked the public to submit 2 million. Then it got changed before the process is finished. We haven't even seen the submissions, like I said. And given it's a capacity figure, we haven't seen legislation, nothing like that. In the middle of a process, I just do not know why we wouldn't just go back with 2 million and let the experts sort it out, and they can bring it down to 1.6, or they can do whatever they like in their expert opinion in response to submissions. So I don't know why we've chosen the minister's letter over Aucklanders here. That's what it feels like to me, and that was the essence of my question. Yeah, and I mean, so many planning debates, and I think I've given the same speech about 50 times, sorry colleagues, but I do worry, like, who would be a developer in this city? Because the development pipeline requires certainty. It requires years and decades to invest huge money. And you know, I don't understand why we keep chopping and changing. And even in the middle of a process like this, it drives me nuts. Throughout this process, I am concerned that there's been a fundamental misunderstanding of what the words enabled capacity means. We have had this debate here, we've had this debate in the media and in all other different forums. Colleagues need to understand what the word actually means. It's a ceiling, not a forecast. It doesn't mean 7 million homes actually built. If the capacity is tight, the market runs into constraints in supply, and that is why we need that flexibility, and that is why we build in a lot of capacity here, so that the market can do its thing. I do get surprised sometimes about, you know, the normal politics gets upended a little bit here, because people that normally love the market all of a sudden love government interference when it impacts on them personally and their perception. And I just got to address a couple of things here. To be clear, I love housing people. I've never said anything else. I sent it in a letter to 15,000 of my ward in the election. I'll remind colleagues that I live in a townhouse in an intensified development. It's beautiful. I love it. I love my neighbours. We kids play together, all that kind of stuff. I've been an open supporter of housing in my ward, and my community understands that. I've only ever asked at this table for fairness. And that is what West Aucklanders want, by and large. They too are not anti-housing. They only want fairness. We also have an affordability crisis in the city. I looked it up this morning. We're still at 8.2 times annual income to average house price, putting us at about 12th in world cities in the Demographia survey. And I've always said at this table as well, it's our duty to fix that problem. It's the duty of everyone in public office, central government, local government, to fix that problem and house our people. The unitary plan has made a notable effect on house prices as well. I've got to point out, there's no contention that isn't the case. They were even worse before. They're much worse before. They're still bad, but they were worse before. It's made a great start, and we've actually received international attention as leaders on the progress that we made here. We should be proud of that as Aucklanders. But I would also contend that it didn't go far enough because of the politics of those days. We didn't get it completely right. And we're seeing the effects of that in the outer suburbs of Auckland now. We have more to do to become a world-class modern city that is positive, that confidently faces the world, that has ambition and growth and economic development and provides a great life for families. That's the city that I want to live in. So I'll just leave you with this. A community is made up of its people and its spirit, not its buildings. And I didn't interrupt you. I wish the government didn't back down. I'd have preferred that we voted for 2 million. But I thank you, Chair, and I thank staff for what is otherwise a sensible compromise, and I'll support this work today. Thank you, Chair.
Good. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Newman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just trying to process the speech, and I have great respect for Councillor Henderson. It's been an interesting day. I'm surprised that God got damned twice, actually, but I've been